The jailed founder and leader of the PKK calls on the Kurdish group to disband. That follows 4 decades of fighting with Turkiye, costing 40,000 lives. So why is this coming now, and what impact could it have on Turkiye and the region? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. There is no alternative to democracy in the pursuit and realisation of a political system. A reasonable statement, most would agree. But when those very words come from the leader of a group that has fought a bitter conflict for 4 decades, well, it's world news. And they were part of a statement that Abdullah Ocalan, founder and leader of the Kurdistan Workers Party, or PKK, issued from his jail cell in a prison on a Turkish island. He's been behind bars since he was abducted in Kenya by Turkish special forces just over 26 years ago. A man revered by his people but reviled by many in Turkiye, he now wants his group to lay down its arms and disband. His call is of major regional political significance, reverberating across not just Turkiye but Syria, Iraq and Iran too. So why now? Could it end decades of conflict? And what might the political implications for Turkiye be and the region? We'll discuss all this and more with our guests, but first, this report from Omer Sharif.
A call to end a decades-old conflict that's claimed tens of thousands of lives. Abdullah Ocalan, the leader of the Kurdish Workers Party, or PKK, says it's time for the group to lay down its arms and disband. His statement was read out by politicians from the pro-Kurdish People's Equality and Democracy Party after they visited him in a prison on an island in the Sea of Marmara of Istanbul. He's urged the group's Congress to ratify his decision.
All groups should lay down their arms and the PKK must dissolve itself.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's AK party has called on the groups to heed Ocalan's call. The message of the PKK's founder was greeted with celebrations in southeastern Turkiye, the country's Kurdish heartland.
If Ocalan deems this appropriate, we will obey him, because this issue cannot be solved with weapons and force, because we do not want to see blood on our doorsteps anymore. Enough is enough.
Turkey and the PKK have been at war for more than 4 decades, with the Turkish military attacking targets within the country and in neighbouring Iraq and Syria. Ankara has designated the PKK as a terrorist group, as has the US and its Western allies. At least 40,000 people have been killed in the conflict as the PKK aim to establish an independent Kurdish state. Although in recent times, the focus has been on greater autonomy and rights for Kurds. Ocalan has been serving a life sentence since 1999 after being convicted of treason. And his call comes months after Ankara suggested he could be granted parole if the PKK renounces violence and disbands. A peace process between the PKK and the Turkish state collapsed a decade ago. The group has since launched regular attacks in the country. Some believe that Ocalan's call may bring historic changes.
Once the armed struggle is out of the picture, probably the Kurdish struggle for rights and liberties will be more legitimate both internally and externally.
Despite being in jail, Ocalan remains a hugely influential leader for many Kurds. His call for peace could have major implications for the region, where the PKK has affiliates in Syria, Iran and Iraq, and where his announcement was met with applause. In Syria, Kurdish forces hold significant territory, but what influence Ocalan has over them is not clear. Their commander in the region welcomed Ocalan's statement, saying the call is not directed at his forces.
The issue is related to the PKK, the issue of laying down arms, and it has nothing to do with us, and it's nothing directed at us and our forces.
Turkey's war with the PKK has led to a sweeping crackdown against pro-Kurdish parties in recent years. The Turkish government has accused them of links to the group. Ocalan's call for peace is being seen by many as a chance to reset ties, but others are skeptical the outcome will be positive. Sharif, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Well, this all started when the PKK launched an armed insurgency against Turkiye back in 1984. But its forces are also present in the neighbouring region. It operates from mountain strongholds in northern Iraq and is linked to the YPG fighters in Syria, a key ally of the United States. The PKK also has forces in Iran. All right, let's get into this with our guests straight away. In Ankara, we have Omer Ozkizilcik, a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council's Middle East Programme, Director of Turkish Studies at the Omran Centre for Strategic Studies. In Cairo is H.A. Hellyer, Senior Fellow in Geopolitics, International Security and Middle East Studies at the Royal United Services Institute, a defence and security think tank. And in the United States, in Virginia indeed, Mohammed Salih, non-resident senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute. His work largely focuses on regional Kurdish affairs. A very warm welcome to you all. It is a big deal indeed, this story. And H.A. Hellyer, I'd like to start with you. 4 decades of armed struggle, 40,000 killed, and now the prospect of peace. Before we delve into the nitty-gritty of all this, could you just contextualise this for us? Just how much of a turning point in history could this be if the PKK indeed do lay down their arms?
Thank you for having me on the program. So I'm glad you said could, because, of course, there are multiple possibilities and potentialities here. But in the event that this does actually lead to a genuine peace and the laying down of arms by the PKK, then I think the ramifications are quite significant, not simply for Turkey, but also in Syria, somewhat in Iraq as well. And I think that that's the key issue here. Over the past few months, there have been a number of, frankly, seismic changes in the region. They were unrelated, but will interact with each other in quite significant ways. So the fall of the Assad regime, for example, keeping in mind that, for example, when it comes to the PKK, many of their leaders had sought refuge in Syria under the Assad regime, going back many, many years. In fact, Ocalan himself was based out of Syria very early on until the mid-late 90s, right? When you think about the coming to power of President Trump in the United States, that has had an impact in terms of support for Kurdish forces in northeast Syria. So there are a number of things that have happened over the past few months that I think have all come together.
Okay, well, we'll get into those things shortly,
It's the time to move forward.
Sure, we'll get into all these things shortly. But Mohammed Salih first, what does this mean, this moment for Kurds after 40 years? Is this defeat? Is this disappointment? Is this disillusionment? Or is this moment a moment of opportunity that the struggle of 40 years has yielded?
It really depends on who you are asking, but the consensus among the majority of Kurds in the region is that this is a moment of hope. It is offering a glimmer of hope that a longest-standing conflict that, as you said, has claimed over 40,000 lives so far across a period of 4 decades of conflict might be actually coming to an end. However, also, given the complexity and complications of this situation, people are also treating this with quite, a significant amount of skepticism. It is not that people are expecting there is going to be any sort of quick and easy fixes. This is definitely not going to be a straightforward, smooth and linear process. We will be most probably, even in the best case scenario, if some sort of of an agreement is actually going to be achieved and peace is going to be realized, we are going to be witnessing ups and downs throughout this process. And it's not going to, be something that will happen in a matter of weeks or even months, probably.
And Omar, from your point of view, from where you're sitting in Ankara, from your perspective, do you agree with that it's not going to be a straightforward process, that perhaps this has been greeted with skepticism too in Turkiye?
So yes, obviously, Turkey is waiting now to see how the PKK's Kandi leadership will react and how the PKK Syrian branch most notably will react to this declaration. However, we have to underline here one thing. This statement by Abdullah Öcalan did not come out of nowhere, because the Turkish counterterrorism strategy has pushed this to happen. In the past, in 2015, the PKK was launching urban warfare in Turkish cities in the southeast of Turkey. Now, the PKK has no operational capability in terms of guerrilla warfare in Turkey's southeast. The PKK's line of infiltration from Iraq into Turkey has been crushed. The PKK in Syria is under huge pressure with losing all of the territory on the western side of the Euphrates River. So with all of these coming together, the Turkish counterterrorism strategy has achieved quite a lot. And now the Corps Abdullah Öcalan gives the opportunity for the PKK and for the Kurdish political sphere all together to get rid of the terrorism aspect and to engage only in politics. This is the main thing that I value here the most, because even if the PKK doesn't lay down its weapon, now we have the chance that the pro-Kurdish political parties may distance themselves from the PKK. Or secondly, it is also a possibility that this might divide the PKK into two branches, a dogmatic radical wing and a more realistic pragmatic wing, or the PKK may accept and fully disband and disarm and dissolve itself. We have yet to see how the PKK's Kandi leadership will react to this. But let me be clear, if this fails, the Turkish military counterterrorism operations will only be facilitated after this, and Turkey has now the moral high ground much more than it had ever before.
All right, which leads me, H.A. Hellyer, to the quote that I read at the beginning of the programme: "There is no alternative to democracy in the pursuit and realisation of a political system." That's what Ocalan has said. And it's not something that he would have said back in the 1980s and 90s. It's not something he would have written. So do you think that the channels of democratic politics are now newly open?
So I'm not sure that it's about it being newly open as much as I think a pragmatic assessment of where the Kurdish question actually is, given everything that your other guests have mentioned, and also as I described vis-a-vis the fall of the Assad regime, and frankly a change in what remained of the rules-based international order, which has, of course, become incredibly fragmented following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as well as, of course, Israel's war on Gaza. I think that there's a recognition, not simply within the PKK, but more generally throughout the region, that, look, we're not going to be able to count on external forces at all. We're going to have to rely on engaging within our own region in order to try to find solutions to particular problems. And I think that that's part of what's going on here. I think that Ocalan and probably quite a few among the Kurdish leadership more generally, because he wouldn't have done this simply on his own, recognize that the balance of power has definitely shifted, and in order to get the best possible outcome for their people, for their cause, this is the way to go.
Mohammed, of course, we don't know if the PKK will accept this. It still has to be ratified by the PKK Party Congress, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And that was also mentioned in Abdullah Öcalan's announcement yesterday. The party leaders in Mount Kandil of Iraqi Kurdistan have said over the past couple of weeks that while they welcome this kind of initiative from Ocalan and the possibility of an agreement, of a peace agreement between Ocalan and the Turkish government, but they've also been very much clear that there has to be some sort of a legal and constitutional solution to the longest-standing Kurdish conflict, an issue in the country. In fact, a few days ago, Murat Karalan, who is one of the senior military commanders of the PKK, said, that there have to be also steps addressing the fate of the group's fighters and leaders in the mountains. and that this was not the kind of group that would be just disbanded upon an order from Ocalan. That there needs to be practical steps agreed upon by all sides for this process to actually move forward in practice. And, that is what also a lot of people have been pointing out basically since yesterday, that as much as Ocalan's announcement is important, is historic, and offers an opportunity for peace, this needs to be followed by, practical steps on the ground in terms of offering, certain rights to the Kurdish people in Turkey, enshrining these rights in the Turkish constitution, and also, other important details such as issuing an amnesty for the PKK fighters and leaders, facilitating or allowing, refuge for the party's senior leadership in other countries, either in the region or in the West. So there are all these important details that need to be worked out, and so. Just looking at the announcement itself should not really, give the impression that peace has been achieved and, that everything is going to fall into place automatically from here on. There is a lot in terms of the nitty-gritty of the process of an agreement between the PKK and more broadly the Kurdish movement in Turkey and the Turkish government that needs to be worked out.
And Omar, something we've already alluded to. How much do you think the changing dynamics in Syria are affecting this?
Yeah, I think Syria is a huge part of this, because in the past, the PKK strategy was quite working out in Syria. They were almost very close to establishing an autonomous region there in northeast, in a predominantly Arab area, which was quite ironic that the Kurdish majority, the PKK tried to establish there. However, they trusted on Russia's protection, and they trusted on American support. They trusted on the alignment with the Assad regime and Iranian weapon supplies. Now the Iranian weapon supplies are no longer there. Russia is no longer there to protect the PKK Syrian branch, the YPG, and the SDF. There is no longer the Assad regime they can align with. And it appears that the Trump administration will eventually also withdraw from Syria. So the situation is not tangible and not sustainable. So this is something that may lead. And I do not think that Abdullah Öcalan per se, his call, may result in a change of attitude by the current leadership and the Syrian branch of the PKK. But his call can be used as an excuse for internal voices who think that this fight should not continue anymore. And
well, we heard from the leader of the SDF, didn't we, saying that this does not apply to us, Omar?
Yes, he did say this, but he wants also to reach a deal with Damascus. And so far, the country leadership was quite against his deal with Damascus. Now, with Abdullah Öcalan's call, his hand has been empowered against his own support base, who did not agree for a deal with Damascus. And if there is a deal between the SDF and Damascus, this will also facilitate the process in Turkey. But let me be clear about one particular thing. In the past, in the peace process, we tried a negotiated settlement between Turkey and the PKK. As of now, we don't have a negotiated settlement or something similar to that. There will be no tit for tat. There will be, as Öcalan said, no separate state, no federalism, no autonomous region, or not even cultural rights, especially for Kurds. But this is a government victory. And Turkey basically offered Abdullah Öcalan, if he can succeed this, that he can get into house arrest and lead the Kurdish political movement in Turkey within the limits of the Turkish democracy. And here, Turkey has its
Mohammed,
flaws in democracy, but it is the best
thank you, Omar. Mohammed,
is
that something that's going to be satisfactory to Kurds across the region? Because effectively what we're saying is that this is the end of the dream of an independent Kurdish state.
Sure. Well, it's important to realize that the PKK has, officially given up on demanding an independent Kurdish state in Turkey. It has not even been asking for federalism. Up until recently, it made demands for some sort of autonomy within the, borders of the state of Turkey. But it's also important to really realize that Öcalan's message was quite general and in some ways also cryptic, which allows a lot of room for interpretation. It can be stretched in terms of what it contains, what it implies. and what it aims to achieve, and we have already seen signs of that. For example, the Turkish government and the ruling AK Party officials in Turkey have said that Ocalan's call for disarmament and dissolution of the PKK should also include the SDF. It's also, important to note here that following the press conference or the event yesterday where Ocalan's announcement was read out, that one of the DEM party, which is the pro-Kurdish party in Turkey, one of their MPs, Seri Soraya Önder, said that Ocalan had also told them verbally that this announcement cannot really be realized without a democratic and legal framework to support it. And so there will be a lot of detail that have to be worked out. And even though Ocalan, in his announcement, said that the Kurds are no longer even asking for autonomy, which was, sort of the bare minimum of the Kurdish demands, at least up until recently, there is going to be a certain degree of resistance to that within the broader Kurdish public and political movement. So there has to be some sort of a trade-off. Otherwise, this announcement would be, practically nothing but just an announcement or declaration of surrender and capitulation. And I doubt, given, the long history of the Kurdish issue in Turkey, which goes, way beyond and before the PKK, you can trace it back to the late Ottoman times even, and in particular, since the establishment of the Turkish Republic. Given this deep historical dimension and roots of this issue, that neither Ocalan nor the PKK really, or for that matter, even the Kurdish MPs in the Turkish parliament will be in a position to say that they are going to accept all the conditions of the Turkish government in terms of the dissolution of the PKK and ask for nothing concrete in return, really.
Right. Well, let's put that point to H.A. Hellyer. Do you think it will be possible to produce a satisfactory trade-off between Turkiye and the PKK that will enable the Kurds to continue with their dream of autonomy in some sense?
So there are two things here that I think are important. One, all possibilities are open. Okay, so you could see the PKK go forward to this. You could see it splitting, as you alluded to earlier. I don't see signs of that at the moment, but I think it's entirely possible. But I think that there's, and this is my second point, there's a broader moment as a result of the fall of the Assad regime in Syria that I think is really sending ripple effects, not just in northeast Syria with the Kurds, but more generally. That, look, the conditions that allowed for this sort of armed struggle or this sort of fight within Turkey and in the region more generally over what is considered to be historical Kurdistan, those conditions have fundamentally changed. And I think that when they see, particularly as your other guest mentioned, the Americans not being willing to support the SDF in northeast Syria, when they see the empowering of a new regime in Damascus that is very clearly aligned with Ankara in many ways, I think that they realize that there is a historic moment here, and it's one that they can try to take advantage of and salvage as much as they can, or one that they can fight against. And right now it seems that at least Ocalan has chosen the former.
And Omar, as far as Turkey is concerned, what will Erdogan's position be on PKK affiliates, say, for example, in northern Syria moving forwards now?
So the Turkish position is quite clear. Turkey will not tolerate the SDF to be an autonomous region in Syria or to remain as a separate bloc within the Syrian army, as well as Damascus will not accept this. And here we have to understand, as the former speaker just said, Turkey has established a new reality in region, geopolitical reality. Turkey is in close cooperation with Damascus, with Syria. Turkey is in good relationship and coordination with the Iraqi Kurdistan. And Iraqi Kurdistan has expressed their support for Abdullah Öcalan's call. Turkey has agreed with the Iraqi government on the PKK being a banned organization in Iraq. And Iran has been defeated hugely, and Iran was one of the major supporters of the PKK as well. So all of this indicates that Turkey will not tolerate this autonomous entity or separate entity within the army. There is only one way forward, and this is to disband, disarm, engage politically. And let us be clear here, Turkey, even though it has some flaws, is still the best democracy in the region. And furthermore, this new atmosphere, if there is no more the threat of terrorism, if there's no more the security aspect to the Kurdish question in Turkey, if there's no more the threat of the shadow of terror on Kurdish politics in Turkish society, I expect that the Turkish political sphere will open up very much, that the Turkish democracy will open up very much, and we will be able to discuss many different things that we are not able to discuss now.
Thanks, Omar, for that. Mohammed, to you, agreement with the PKK must include part of a larger arrangement that includes equal status and the democratic rights of Turkey's Kurdish population, because if that doesn't happen, at the very least, this could once again spill over into violence, couldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it remains definitely to be seen what kind of details would be worked out between both sides, the Kurdish representatives and the Turkish government. And, whether this kind of agreement or the points agreed upon would be actually given a legal and constitutional legitimacy and framework. However, again, as I said before, that, that the PKK issue should be really seen as part of a bigger and broader, problem and issue in Turkey that goes back to the very origins of the Turkish Republic. There is definitely a way forward in terms of peace and in terms of settling this conflict. It definitely depends on the goodwill and the understanding of interests of both sides. But even though there has been conflict over the past several decades or in the early Republican era between the Kurds and the Turkish Republic, the Turkish government, that does not mean that that has to be the future course of this relationship. That there is a historical precedence which can be drawn upon, called upon, in terms of charting a new path in Turkey. And I think, as long as there is some serious goodwill and if negotiations are being conducted in good faith on both sides, but in particular on the side of the Turkish government, given that it is the dominant party in this conflict, that there is a very good and decent chance for peace.
Who knows, this may yet herald a new era of equitable peace. Gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Omer, Ozkizilcik, H.A. Hellyer and Mohammed Salih, thanks very much indeed. And thank you too for watching. For this and all the stories we're covering, just go to our website at aljazeera.com. And if you want to take the discussion on, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And of course, you can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is at AJ Inside Story. From me, Nick Clark, and the whole team here, it's goodbye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.